It's kind of a momentous occasion tonight for me. Paul, you gave out these little babies back in 2018, A Family of Great Expectations.
Yep.
It is now filled out.
I'll get you a bigger book
I
next
have no
time.
more pages.
I'll get you a lot bigger one.
So my apologies for my voice. I just started losing it this afternoon. I may have been talking too much at work or have allergies. I don't know. So bear with me. I'm going to start out with a few verses out of Proverbs chapter 1. And let's keep those in mind as we go through this devotional. So Proverbs 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Verse 22. How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity, and the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge? And then chapter 1, verse 32. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. As Christians, we're often accused of being simple or lacking knowledge. There are many other less desirable, unmentionable adjectives that can be used towards believers of the faith. Tonight, we're going to consider something called irreducible complexity. And I'll try not to get too far into the details and try to keep it, I guess, somewhat concise and understandable. But ultimately, there was a man, his name is Michael J. Behe, and in 1996, he published a book called Darwin's Black Box. He's an associate professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University. And he took up Darwin's challenge in Darwin's book on the origin of species. The challenge that Darwin stated on page 174 of his book. Then basically, if it could be demonstrated that a complex organ could not be formed by numerous successive slight modifications, his theory would completely break down. And so as a result of that, being a biochemist, he studied something called the cell, the foundation of life. And he came up with this concept called intelligent design as a result of it. He challenged the theory of evolution. He did not reject it in completion. The only aspect of it that he challenged was random mutation. So the idea of the whole concept of the cell is that, from his perspective, if you have a single system that's composed of well-matched interacting parts that contribute to the basic function, wherein if you removed any one of those components, the system would effectively cease functioning. Layman's terms, let's take a mousetrap. A mousetrap has 9 parts. It has a platform, a spring, a hammer, a catch, a holding bar, and 4 staples. If you remove any one of those parts, that mousetrap will not function. It will not catch a mouse. So he took that concept and he saw in the cell a greatly functioning system, single system. If you take a look, I don't know if you've heard of the journal Nature. Nature, to quote from their journal, the cell's macromolecular machines contain dozens or even hundreds of components, a single cell. But unlike man-made machines built on assembly lines, these cellular machines assemble spontaneously from their components. It is as though cars could be manufactured by merely tumbling their parts on the factory floor. Think about that. So, this guy, he is an evolutionary biologist. He does not acknowledge God. He acknowledges intelligent design, but he will not call that God. He does not accept or acknowledge the holy writings, though he has associated himself with Roman Catholicism. And the reason he did that is because he figured that that gave him leeway to not really accept God, from his perspective. And creationists they use his concept of, this whole idea of irreducible complexity, meaning like if you take one part away, the whole system will cease to function. It is used, and he's got a lot of support from the creationist side. But we also need to keep in mind that he is not a creationist. So, even if we may use that argument, we need to be careful about where the information is coming from. Also, he has been pretty much rejected by the entire scientific community almost unanimously. And they've come up with several arguments. One of them in which they have stated that researchers have proposed potentially viable evolutionary pathways, if you will, to show that it is conceivable to gradually have these slight changes, and so you don't necessarily need every part for a system to actually function. It just sort of eventually evolves and functions to a certain point. And it can be more complex, less complex, it can vary back and forth. And their argument is that it should not be possible to conceive of such pathways if this whole concept was true. But think about the simple logic of being able to conceive of a pathway. As a kid, I used to watch Star Trek. I used to think about traveling at light speed. It's conceivable to think of that, but it's impossible to do, at least at this time. And think about beaming up Scotty. We've done a lot of research in physics and trying to figure out how we might be able to, do something of that sort, but we can't do it. So we may be able to think of things, and whether they are true or completely, fictional, we are able to conceive of things. But that does not make it does not justify that it, just because you can conceive of something, that it disproves someone else's idea. So with that in mind, and I'm running a little short on time, I want to bring us back to the fact that, yes, we are sometimes, accused of being simple and lacking in knowledge. And vice versa, it goes both ways. There are some Christians out there that are not so nice about the other views of others that they disagree with. Let's take a quick look at Proverbs 18, verse 15. Proverbs 18, verse 15. The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. In the earlier verses, we talked about simplicity and leaving simplicity, and the simplicity in the context of, our own knowledge, our own evil ways. But we are to seek knowledge. As Christians, we are not to be simple and lacking in knowledge. We are called to seek that knowledge. We are called, if you go back to chapter 1, verse 32, for the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. And again in verse 22, how long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? And fools hate knowledge. We are not called to be simple. We are called to think for ourselves. We are called to acquire knowledge. There are many unkind things that are said, and it's no surprise. When a person's individual beliefs are challenged, it can get very emotional. We need to examine all of the evidence. We need to do so in a balanced and an objective manner. Science and religion do not need to be enemies. In fact, I would purport that they are perfectly harmonious. We need to take a look at the available information, and when we are talking with people or we are addressing things in writing, we need to do so with respect. It is important not to attack an individual, but to point out the error itself and focus on that. And do so using facts and all of the available knowledge that we have. Most of the scientific community do not even take a true hard look at the evidences for the Bible that we often study. And we as Christians oftentimes don't take a hard look at what the scientists are working on. And it's important that when we engage in these activities, we are called to seek knowledge. The scientific method in and of itself is not wrong. It is our use of it that can sometimes be in error, and we need to recognize and account for the hypotheses, the theories, and the assumptions that we make when we're trying to search out knowledge and draw conclusions from that. And to go back again to the idea of being kind and respectful. Proverbs chapter 14, verses 15 through 18. The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident. He that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. The simple inherit folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. My time is about up, but the message is quite simple. I again purport that religion and science are harmonious, and if we examine all of the evidences, it is, from what I have seen so far, I have not seen a true clash. I have not seen where it does not marry up. And many fanciful arguments are made on both sides, and they can sometimes become very heated and disrespectful, and we need to be mindful to keep our cool, to approach it in a well-balanced, objective, and loving manner. And we know in our hearts at the end that God's will shall be done, and that at the end of the day, God does love us, and if we continue to seek, to search, to understand more each and every day, there will indeed be a reward for that in heaven. If anyone has any concerns, prayer needs, you name it, please come forward as we stand and sing.